Aboro, Aboye, Aboshishe, and Ekabo to another live stream. Welcome again to our Friday live at Ile Ijuba Ode Otun. All right, before I do tonight's reading on history, I would open by reciting the Iba. Open ni fún Ọlọ́run Olódùmarè ọba ìjìkú, Mojiloni, Mowogun mẹ́rin ayé, ìbà ìlà oòrùn, ìbà ìwọ̀ oòrùn, ìbà àríwá, ìbà gúúsù, ìbà ọba ìgbà ayé, ìbà oòrùn òkè, ìbà bàbá, ìbà yèyé, àtiwọ̀ oòrùn, ìbàṣẹ egungun kìkì egungun, ìbàṣẹ orí orí inú ìpòrí àtiwọ̀ oòrùn. Àṣẹ, àṣẹ, àṣẹ. All right, and tonight we continue with our regular reading, and we are continuing from the two books that we've been studying so far for quite some time. One of them, is called Cedulants and Capitulants, and the subtitle is The Politics of the Colored Opposition in the Slave Society of Trinidad between 1783 and 1838. The other book we're reading from is called Immigration into the West Indies in the 19th Century. The author of this book is K.O. Lawrence. Alright, so I'm going to read from this book first, and then I would read from the other book that speaks about the Cedulants and the Coloreds of the Caribbean. In 1854, amidst new and determined efforts to recruit labor, a new law was passed to facilitate the introduction of labor on contract. The law offered a contractual wage much lower than that prevailing in the free labor market. In view of certain prerequisites which the contract assured, but which were never provided, working conditions were hardly better than under the law of 1849. The planters would not accept the notion of Chinese or Mayas as completely free laborers, and were determined to keep them in a servile position, if at all possible. They regarded the presence of laborers protected by contracts as likely to subvert discipline on the estates, and subsequently the contracts were so framed as to involve renunciation by the immigrant even of the rights supposedly reserved to him by the law. Maya Indians were again sought, and the Cuban firm of Guaycuria Hermanos obtained an agreement with the Mexican president Santa Anna to recruit labor in Yucatan on the supposition that the ill treatment of 1849 would not be permitted to reoccur. But this hope proved ill-founded. Few employers sought their services, although they were reputedly hard-working, and the project enjoyed even less success than in 1849. In 1861, the Mexican president Juarez finally stopped the traffic altogether. Perhaps 2,000 Maya Indians were brought to Cuba between 1849 and 1861. In 1849, 1847, a shipload of 571 Chinese had been obtained from Amoy, but they had not been a success. No effort has been made to select persons with experience of agricultural labor, and there were early complaints that they were insubordinate and in bad health. Many aged and infirm persons were among them, while the lack of interpreters was a serious problem. But several employers were quite satisfied with them, so the junta later returned to plans for importing Chinese. As this passed, the Chinese seemed the only adequate answer to the labor problem, for Maya Indians and Europeans had both failed to answer, and free Africans never materialized. Furthermore, as slave trading became increasingly difficult in the 1850s, the cost of buying slaves rose sometimes as high as 400 pesos, and of hiring them 25 pesos per month. At such rates, it was cheaper to buy Chinese contract labor. All right, and that is the reading from this document for this week, Immigration into the West Indies in the 19th Century by K.O. Lawrence. I'm now going to read a bit from Cedulants and Capitulants, and to give a gentle reminder, this particular book was based on lectures given by Carl C. Campbell, who was the senior lecturer in history in the University of the West Indies at the Mona campus in Jamaica. All right. The metropolitan centers provided a better environment than as in the 20th century for the free coloreds of various islands in the same empire to cooperate and to organize for the benefit of the colonial brothers. There was one instance in which free coloreds from two colonies, St. Kitts and Nevis, used the same colored spokesman in England to urge their case. There is evidence of organizational activity in France, especially towards the end of the 18th century. Republican governments and friends in the National Assembly were willing to listen to elite free coloreds from the French Antilles. Vincent Ogie, Julian Raimond, and Cyril Bisset became well-known activists in political circles in Paris in the late 18th and early 19th century. The structure of French colonial government, which allowed for colonial delegates and tighter control exercised by the metropolitan power, encouraged the French colonial free coloreds to look to France for help earlier in their struggle than the British colonial free coloreds. The French anti slavery movement used the question of political rights for free coloreds to open the door to slave emancipation. One gets the impression that there was more of a politicized free colored community in Paris than in London, Amsterdam, or Copenhagen. Perhaps this is not unrelated to other impressions, namely a more considerable use of French metropolitan secondary schools and universities by children of elite coloreds, especially those from Saint-Domingue. There would also there would also have been activists among the hundreds of free colored refugees who fled to France from Saint-Domingue. It is also noticeable that free colored troublemakers in the French Antilles were sometimes exiled to France or even sent there to serve parts of their sentence. English colonial free coloreds were hardly ever sent to England for trial or punishment. The colonial government of the British West Indies, even the Crown Colony government, did not look to the metropole for assistance in dealing with free colored agitators. Nor do we know of any prominent free colored person from the British colonies who played any significant part in the winning of free colored rights by political activity in England. Some free colored spokesmen were sent from Jamaica, Trinidad, Dominica, Montserrat, and St. Kitts at specific times to present the free coloreds case to the colonial office or to parliament. But these men, even Richard Hill from Jamaica, who made a favorable impression at the bar of the House of Commons, did not remain long in the metropole and were purveyors of information more than leaders of political action. The same could be said of Louis Lesesne and Edward Escoffery from Jamaica. The structure of politics in England seemed impervious to brown men from the colonies. All right, and that would end my reading from Cedulants and Capitulants for this Friday's History Live. All right, I'd like to thank everyone for stopping in, and I would like to say you do good for yourself, you do bad for yourself. And hopefully, we would meet again on Tuesday, where I will do another live on the Ifa Orisha Tradition Discussion Show. All right, I want to thank everyone for stopping in and see you later. Odabo.